Good afternoon, FINEX members, and welcome to the July GMM. We have a very nice program that we have done for you. But before that, we need to get our formalities out of the way. So what you saw earlier was the past and upcoming projects and activities. And now I'd like to acknowledge our year-round sponsors. We have the CFO of the Year Award that's coming up on, we will start the nomination will end on 31st of July 2020. So if you have any CFO that you want to nominate for the CFO of the Year Award, please send in the nomination forms on or before July 31, 2020. Thank you very much. We have an upcoming mid-year economic briefing on July 21, Tuesday at 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. We have the following, then we have Blockchain 101, which is actually a virtual classroom with FINEX Academy on July 27, Monday, again at 10 o'clock a.m. Then we have the retail e-commerce in the new normal. That will take place on July 23 at 1 to 2 p.m. And this is brought to you by the ICT committee. Then we have the Transform to AGILE by leveraging emerging technologies. Again, this will be on 28th of July, Tuesday at 3 to 4:30 p.m. So please get in touch with the Secretariat to register for this. Now we have the Women in Finance Committee, Rising Up to the Challenges of the New World Order. This will take place on July 30, Thursday at 2 to 3:30 p.m. We have two wonderful women who will be speaking on their experiences in today's new normal. And we have to the Junior FINEX Committee in partnership with the Psychological Association of the Philippines on August 5, Wednesday, 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. We have Dr. Cecil Magpantay, a clinical psychologist of St. Luke's, and Ms. Maureen Jean Lara, lead training and development officer of AXA Philippines. And they will be talking on the new normal mental wellness in the COVID-19 times. This will also basically be addressing the youth, the students, and they're very hard hit with this type of new normal. So let me acknowledge our year-round sponsors. We have Shell Philippines. We have, nawala na. Okay. We have our diamond sponsors, ABS-CBN, Fight On ABS, San Miguel Corporation, BDO, Grant Thornton, Punong Bryan and Araulio, Stratcom. We have NGCP and Santa Lucia Land as our other sponsors. And I think that's it. So, may I now ask everyone, may I now call our president to call this meeting to order? President Jeng Pascual, you may now call this meeting to order.
Yes, thank you very much, Tony Boy. Good afternoon, fellow FINEX members. I would like to call today's FINEX General Membership Meeting for July 2020 to order.
Okay, let us now go to the invocation and the national anthem. Father God, all glory, honor, and blessing, all power and might, all praise and thanksgiving be to you, Abba Father, to us all. We stand on your word, declaring that when we call upon you, you will answer us and be with us in distress. Our deliverer and healer, we seek your protection for our families and all of us from the scourge of the COVID-19 and all manner of disease and affliction. We pray especially for our health workers who tirelessly perform their duties at great risk to themselves. We pray for all of us co-workers in the business community that we may perform our task with greater diligence in these difficult times to serve each other and our country in solidarity and spirit of social responsibility. We pray for all those in authority in government and in the private sector, that they may have all the wisdom, competence, and strength to lead us and serve through this period of crisis, with special attention to our poor and disadvantaged brethren who are struggling to survive. We pray for reconciliation and peace among all Filipinos as we come to better realize our oneness as people in good times and bad, as a common dread unites us. So in acknowledgement of our dependence on you and in obedience, we approach you, Father God, humble ourselves and pray, seek your presence and turn from our evil ways, that you may listen from heaven, forgive our sins, and revive our land. In the loving name of your Son, Jesus, we pray. Amen. Just now. Thank you very much. Before I turn you over to our president for his president times, I just like to plug in to all FINEX members to download the FINEX Focus. I think their secretariat has sent it to you via email, or you can download it in the FINEX website. Please listen to our president's message in that FINEX Focus, because it's a very powerful message. Mr. President, can you do your president's time?
Thank you very much, Tony Boy. And good afternoon, FINEX members and guests. And welcome once again to our July 2020 General Membership Meeting. I think at this point, the total number of COVID-19 cases in the Philippines just crossed the 57,000 mark, with over 35,000 active. And after 4 months of various levels of lockdowns, the longest community quarantine in the world, and an economy yearning but struggling to recover, it appears that the first wave of infections has not yet hit its peak. And even our colleagues and friends from the UP, University of the Philippines, the researchers there working on the project, estimate that total cases could still increase and hit around 60,000 by the end of this month. Last month, I mentioned that a change in mindset and behavior is needed in order to bring back consumer confidence as we enter the new normal. It appears that hasn't happened in the rush to get back to, it appears it hasn't happened. In the rush to get back to their usual routines, many people might have forgotten that the unseen enemy is still out there. And we have taken for granted the necessary safety precautions and health protocols designed to protect people. And it does not help when those in authority fail to set the right example or lose focus on key priorities desperately needed to move the economy forward. As an organization, we supported and advocated for government measures that we believe mattered for national recovery. And we also voiced our concerns on national issues that we felt needed more thought and consideration. Hence the co-signing of the joint appeal for the President to veto the anti-terrorism bill, which we saw as an extension of the concerns raised in our earlier statement opposing the bill due to a number of inequities we cited. It is regrettable that we are distracted by divisive and controversial issues when we should be working together on more constructive and unifying endeavors to overcome this crisis. But I'm pleased that FINEX continues to focus on activities that are relevant to the needs of our members during these challenging times. On June 22, the FINEX Foundation Business Education Committee, chaired by DJ De Jesus, gathered professors, teachers, and other business educators from across the country to participate in and draw insights from experienced leaders in the industry, including our very own past president, Jim Ismael, and yours truly. In the webinar on understanding how businesses are coping with the COVID-19 impact. And just this morning, the committee concluded the second part of the webinar series for business and finance educators on teaching business under the new norm. On June 23, we welcomed the most recent batches of new members in a virtual fellowship cocktail evening organized by Caloy Cervantes, Tiffy Zulueta, and the membership committee. It was a fun evening of games and drinks with even a special performance by Jet Pampolina and his kids. Acknowledging the significant impact COVID-19 and the associated quarantines and lockdowns had on supply chains, the Financial Inclusion Committee, led by Chair Gay Santos and Vice Chair Joey Camus, organized a webinar on strengthening supply chain finance last July 3 with distinguished speakers from here and abroad, including the Honorable DTI Assistant Secretary, Mary Jean Pacheco. FINEX also took the world stage and represented Asia in the EFA Global CFO Round E-Table on how CFOs handle the economic and financial challenges in the COVID-19 era. This was held on July 3, and yours truly described the priorities of care, continuity, and cash applicable to all companies impacted by the crisis. And I also highlighted the important qualities and roles CFOs need to play in order to thrive in this uncertain environment. And last July 9, the Media Affairs Committee, headed by Wilma Miranda, held its webinar on effective media communication in the time of COVID-19, bringing in seasoned practitioners who enlightened us on how media impact is measured and how digitalization magnifies this impact. Thus far, the focus has been on personal, community, and economic health, on lives and livelihood. Today, we will be talking about health at a planetary scale. Climate change is a world-class issue. We are therefore privileged to have with us this afternoon the following distinguished guests: the Honorable Assistant Secretary Romell Cuenca, Deputy Executive Director of the Climate Change Commission, Dr. Lorenzo Guinto, Chief Planetary Doctor of PH Labs, and Mr. Jose Angelito Palma, Executive Director of WWF Philippines. I wish to thank Marivic Sugapong, Flor Tariela, and the FINEX Foundation Environment Committee for sponsoring this month's GMM, and Nanette De Jesus, Tony Boy, and the rest of the Programs Committee for pulling this very interesting program together. FINEX will continue to play a significant role in industry and society in the pursuit of world-class Philippine business. We stand by our core values of transparency and accountability, integrity and truth, professional excellence, proud to be Filipino, and social responsiveness. These values guide the decisions and actions of our board and the activities and initiatives of our committees during this difficult period. When I described the qualities needed by CFOs to surmount the economic and financial challenges of the COVID-19 era at the EFA CFO Round E-Table, I pointed back to Deloitte's 4 phases of the CFO model of being a strategist, catalyst, steward, and operator. These are the roles CFOs must play and readily shift between in order to help their organizations develop agile responses to the crisis, maintain financial resiliency, and ensure business recovery. And these roles or phases are the same qualities we look for as we search for our ING FINEX CFO of the Year. We just recently announced this search for the 2020 CFO of the Year. So it is time once again to shine the spotlight on the best CFO in the Philippines this year. As Tony Boy mentioned, please start nominating. We are also excited about the upcoming FINEX Week annual conference on October 5 to the 9th, which will feature an entire week of sessions with international personalities and global finance leaders talking about the future of finance in a post-pandemic world. And in order to prepare for all possible options on our future engagements in the new normal, we are conducting a survey to gather feedback on how open you all are to face-to-face meetings and events in the coming months, and also how soon you are ready. So we will appreciate your responses to the survey sent out by the Secretariat through the various channels. And if you please respond to that soon, we will be able to assess how we will move forward with our engagements for the second half of 2020. There are more activities in store in the coming weeks, some already mentioned earlier by Tony Boy. So please stay tuned to the FINEX members exclusive community thread on Viber for the latest announcements. In the meantime, please stay safe, take care of yourselves and each other. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay ang FINEX.
Thank you very much, President Jeng. Our next topic on the agenda is, let me turn you over to Kaloy Cervantes, the head of the membership committee, to induct our new members. We are going to do the induction virtually. By the way, Kaloy has, I like to follow Kaloy on Facebook because in this next upcoming membership meeting, I hope he sends us via Grab Express whatever he's drinking with his son.
Yes, thank you very much, Tony Boy. We'll definitely send you some beer if you become one of the first 15 members who will sign up for the next fellowship. Okay, so for those interested to join the fellowship of FINEX, we will invite you, and Jenny Yap will soon send the invitations. We'd like now to go on to the introduction of new members for induction. We will now induct the following new members. I shall call on the name, stating also the company position if there's one, and company, and if the sponsors. So let me call on, and could you please make the video appear, Mr. IT. Henry T. Gomez Jr., who is the Internal and Audit Manager of AC Energy Inc., our competitor. Sponsored by Mr. Benny Soliven. We will also call on Christian Zingapan, as sponsored by our president, Jose Jerome E. Pascual III, Jeng. Do they now appear in the video screen?
Hello, good afternoon.
Okay, good afternoon. And to add solemnity to the occasion, may I call on our President, Jen Pascual, for their oath of membership. Thank you. You're on mute, Jen.
Thank you very much, Kaloy. May I request our new members, Henry and Trishan, to raise your right hand wherever you are and repeat after me. I state your name. You can go off mute. Let's repeat. I state your name.
I, Henry T. Gomez Jr.,
Having been accepted
having been accepted
as a member of the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines,
having been accepted as a member of the Financial Executive Institute of the Philippines,
do hereby solemnly swear
do hereby solemnly swear
that I will faithfully discharge,
that I will faithfully discharge,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
my duties and responsibilities
my duties and responsibilities
in the pursuit of its goals and objectives,
in the pursuit of its goals and objectives,
that I will protect and uphold
that I will protect and uphold
its constitution and bylaws,
its constitution and bylaws,
that I will abide
that I will abide
by its code of ethics,
by its code of ethics,
that I will observe
that I will observe
the highest professional,
the highest professional,
moral, and ethical standards,
moral, and ethical standards,
and that I voluntarily impose this obligation
and that I voluntarily impose this obligation
upon myself without mental reservation
upon myself without mental reservation
or purpose of evasion.
or purpose of evasion.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations and welcome to FINEX.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Kaloy. And now let's go to the meat of the program. We have 3 guest speakers right now. Let me introduce to you the first guest speaker. Okay, our first guest speaker is Joel Palma. Joel is a fisheries major from the University of the Philippines. Started his career in community organizing small fishermen in Laguna de Bay. Joel handled the Pawikan Marine Turtle Conservation Project of the DNR. He joined World Wildlife Fund Philippines in 1997 as a project manager for the Turtle Islands program in Tawi-Tawi. A fellow on governance and environmental democracy at Wolverhampton University in the UK prior to his appointment as Vice President for Conservation Programs, Joel provided organizational directions and strategic interventions for both national and regional programs, including the chair of the World Wildlife Fund's Coral Triangle Initiative. He designed and implemented the integration and linkage of national and regional programs, plus the organizational's contribution to the achievement of WWF programs and initiatives. He now serves as the Executive Director of WWF Philippines. Joel is also a dive professional like me, a dive master. So let me turn you over to Joel Palma. Joel, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, now I've given permission. Hi, you see me? How's my audio? Is it good?
Yes, it's good.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you very much for inviting me to the officers and members of FINEX in your GMM. And I think this topic that we are discussing right now is very relevant, as mentioned that earlier by the president, that we have to be more strategic, we have to catalyze, and we have to initiate, as CFOs. And this will be a great opportunity for us to really look into what's happening right now. So I titled my presentation, The Turning Point for the Planet, A Decade Left, because we all say that 2020 is the turning point for the planet, and not just the planet, but we didn't realize it's going to be a big year for the economy, the planet, and health. No? And we have a decade left because what's ever happening to our planet, we have to really reverse it until 2030. So we have a decade to reverse the degradation of our planet. Next slide, please. Welcome to the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene is defined as an era wherein what's happening to the planet right now is mainly caused by human activities. Next slide. Basically, it's the economy meets the environment. As you've seen, in the environment world, we always say that the environment will have its own value and contribution to everything. And we even evaluate this, the natural resources valuation. And at times, we always have been measuring countries' resources, wealth, and being on the economic side. But we tend to forget the contribution of all our economic benefits coming from the environment. So this is very important, and we will discuss this further along with myself and the two distinguished experts on the subject. Next slide. As you've seen, we've seen the great acceleration. You guys as CFOs have experienced this. How much was your worth or your company's worth 20 years ago compared to now or prior to March? You've seen a reverse hockey stick, and so is the population, our GDP, transportation, primary energy use. Sadly, also our temperature is increasing. Last year was quite bad for the environment. We had very big systemic forest fires. Australia, Amazon, and everything, and this has taken a lot of toll to us. Our carbon dioxide emissions has gone up, fertilizer, water use, marine fisheries capture, all going up. At the same time, our economy is going up, and you'll see the relationship later. Next slide. Consequently, as the economy has been growing, inversely, nature and our natural resources are going down. As you can see, nature is declining at an unprecedented rate in human history. And this itself is already coming from the World Economic Forum. In fact, every start of the calendar year, we have a WEF. And 5 years ago, the global risk, the WEF would always publish the 5 global risks or the 10 global risks. 5 years ago, there was only about 2 or 3 that's related to the environment. And now the first 5 is all related to the environment, which was like 2020. And not even discussing health as a major issue. So I guess ASec, Romell, and Lorenzo will also be talking about this, the climate models and everything. But what we hope to achieve by 2030 is basically off target. So we need to do a lot more. Our species are going down by 60%. 50% of our coral reefs are basically bleached because of warming. Our biodiversity, our forests are all going down, and not to mention the big extent of forest that was destroyed last year by forest fires. So it's on the downtrend. Next slide. When I started doing conservation work for probably 3 decades now, Uh, I never could have imagined that plastics will become a problem. So we all know that about 8 million metric tons of plastics goes to the oceans every year, and about 1 million metric tons of plastic comes from the Philippines. So top-notch of Philippines. We're the third contributor of marine debris in the oceans made on plastic. No? So that's quite not so good news. And we all know Pasig River. The Pasig River is the 8th river in the world that contributes most plastic waste to the ocean. So it's just a few kilometers from where we are, and it's making great havoc to the environment. That even the food we eat now, the fish that we eat has microplastics, because I think Dr. Renz can also deal on that later. But the plastics cannot degrade. It takes about 400 years before it really disintegrates. There's no such thing as biodegradable plastics. Next slide. At the same time, we know that a lot of people are into involuntary hunger, but at the same time, 1.3 billion tons of food is wasted every year. This is approximately about 30% of the food that is produced is wasted from farm to the plate. And this is quite sad because, in Metro Manila alone, a lot of people are hungry. And in Metro Manila alone, we waste about 1,200 metric tons of food a day. It's just thrown into the garbage. So it's not just consumption, but it's also how efficient we use our resources. And it entails a lot of waste, and not just plastics, but even food, which is very important to us. Next slide. So even business has really acknowledged that we need to do something about the environment. The equation is now clear that our economic development will not be sustainable if we don't take care of our environment, of our planet, because at the end of the day, our raw materials all come from the environment. Just like in the WWF Philippines, we always ask, where do you get your water? People will be saying, our children will be saying, our water comes from the tap. It comes from Manila, MWSS. No, it actually comes from our watersheds in Angat and Ipoh. And mind you, our watersheds in Ipoh and in Angat is actually 60–70% degraded. That's why on the bad El Nino, we are almost threatened with water and water shortage, and it has been a problem in the last 2 years. So it might be a common thing, that unless we really make sure we don't waste water, and also we make sure that we manage the production of our watersheds for our consumption. Next slide. As I mentioned, Tony Boy, we're all divers, as you mentioned. This is about 30% of the coral reef resources was lost in the past 20 years. This can be attributed to many causes. It can be due to elevated sea temperatures, as you see in the picture. This was our project site in Palawan, in Taytay, Palawan. Well-protected, marine protected area. Well, no dynamite fishing, no illegal fishing, 24/7. Bantay Dagats were there in their watchtower. And even if it was well protected from human activities, then came El Nino and it bleached and it died. That's it. Other things also, we have to manage issues with illegal fishing, destructive fishing, and even the waste that we emit to the waterways, down to the rivers, down to, look at Manila Bay, the pollution coming from cities. Coastal development is also part of this. So it's not just climate change, but it's also waste management and overfishing. About 75% of the Philippine fisheries are overfished. I think you all know, those in the fishing sector, we import galunggong. I always say this in our lectures. In 1986, when I was doing work with with Laguna Lake with small fishers. You know, I remember Cory Aquino was saying galunggong was the poor man's fish, but now galunggong is about 300 pesos per kilo. And we even have to import fish, given that we have 7,000 islands and a very long coastline, longer than the United States. We have to import fish, and this is not so good situation for us. That even our security for access to food is not readily available. Next slide. Forest cover. I hope the map is quite clear that we had 70% forest cover in the 1900s, 34%, and when we're down to 3% in the virgin forest cover in the Philippines. That's why water is also very scarce resource now in the Philippines. Remember, no water, no rice. That's why we're not even rice sufficient for the longest time. I think it was during Marcos's time was 1 or 2 years we didn't import rice, but that's it. Ever since we were dependent to the Mekong region for rice. So we're now importing more than we are producing. I'll show you a slide on where we are. Next slide. So at the end of the day, you are finance executives, you know how it's going. At the end of the day, we all know we only have one planet, but we are consuming 1.7. So we're running on a deficit. This equation was like a 2018 report, and this October we are expecting another report on our ecological footprint that we might be hitting some like almost 2 Earth or 2 planets. Just to give you an idea how equity also comes in. There's a study that if the 7 billion people in the planet would live like an average American, we would need 7 planets. If all the 7 billion people will have a lifestyle and consumption and waste, like a European, we need 3 planets. In the Philippines, we are consuming basically more or less 1 planet. So just all right. But the problem is that there's also an equity issue. And on the Philippine aspect, I'll show you a slide later. We're not even producing 1 planet. That's why we have to import lots of our resources to be able to sustain the 109 million Filipinos. Next slide. So now we begin to understand. I'm coming from a lens that, our topic today is on COVID, on planetary health, human health. But I'm just trying to emphasize that this is just connected. That's why we're in this situation. And of course, Lorenzo and ASec Romell will be providing more input to this. Next slide. So I mentioned this earlier, no? Okay, I have 5 minutes left. Thank you, Michael. As mentioned, the World Economic Forum has identified global shapers. This is in 2020. And as you can see, biodiversity loss, climate change, water crisis, which is also environment, human-made environmental disasters like forest fires was there, extreme weather is also forest, is also environment, weapons of mass destruction, and here comes infectious diseases. This was released in January 2020, and the long-term outlook was also the same, and infectious diseases was way off down there, not realizing that January it was already starting. Just to give you some perspective. Next slide. This is the situation that diseases and our wildlife resources has a direct link. According to experts, 3 to 4 new infectious diseases have emerged each year, and majority of these are zoonotic. Doc Renzo take care of the definition later. Originating for wildlife. As you can see, some may not be as bad. Some were able to control this, but But COVID-19 was something that really hit us hard, and until now, we're not even able to manage it, at least in the Philippines, and to some extent globally. So it's all connected. The degradation of our planet has a relationship with the health of the people and eventually the economy. Next slide. So these are the different zoonotic pathogen types. Who are the host, the intermediate host, and the impacts to human, and the drivers. As you can see, most of them are, I had that second picture where you have the economy meets the environment. And you've seen that those are the direct drivers, because the buffer between people, our activities, and nature are just getting thinner, closer, narrower. That what they have, which can not be bad to them, can be very bad to human population and our activities. So next slide. So technically, how you asked me, how can we how do we manage viruses? We need more forests, because it's our protection against diseases coming from wildlife, and not just, and also not consuming them. It's a belt, it's a buffer, as shown in this picture. Next slide. So the pathway to the epidemics, it's deforestation. We're collecting, trafficking, and eating wildlife, as we've known in Wuhan, animal markets, and you get that risk. It's a perfect equation, and I leave that to Dr. Lorenzo later to discuss this more. But the link to environment and diseases are well off established, and that's very important for us to know. Next slide. So this is the consumption and the production of the Philippines. So this was 2011, the last study done by the Climate Commission. And if you just take out consumption and you put their expenses, and then production is revenue, this is our P&L. We're running on a deficit, because in the Philippines, our biocapacity to produce our food, our needs, is 0.6. But at the same time, our consumption is about 1. So we're running on negative 4.4. And this is just a situation. That's why we keep importing many things. Even if we have the money, if no one will be selling our goods to us, that will be something of risk to the Philippines. Next slide. So at the end of the day, this will be my last slide. We see that the economy has been so progressive. We have benefited from it, but we lost track of taking care of the environment, wherein we made sure that the benefits for the economy are also sustained by investing into our resources or nature. As you can see, we're into green finance right now. That's a good thing. That's the trend right now. But this new trend is actually just a drop in the bucket to the over portfolio. And I think this is my challenge to FINEX. Make this bigger. If we invest more in green bonds issuance to make sure that all our investments and our economy are based and taking care of the environment, we will be better off in the situation, and our health will be in a better shape. And I think that's a challenge to everybody. I know it's not easy, but we just have to do it. You know how much COVID has affected our economy? It's far more greater, and we're not even finished yet. So as mentioned by the president of FINEX, that we have to be very strategic, and this is the strategic way of doing things. Next slide. So I will end my presentation with this one to hand over the next presentation to Dr. Lorenzo. That this came from WHO, and this was released just May 18. And this was more or less during the height of the pandemic, but it was not even the height in the Philippines, sad to say. The pandemic is a reminder of the intimate and delicate relationship between people and planet. And the efforts to make our world safer are doomed to fail unless they address the critical interface between people and pathogens and the existential threat to climate change that is making our Earth less habitable. from WHO. It's just quite odd for me coming from the environment field that WHO will be setting out a manifesto on the environment, but it is truly connected. Next slide. So thank you very much. I always like to end on the positive side that we can always do better. We can do this possible. We have 10 years left, and together with business, the environment, with communities, with government, of course, and science, you know, we can reverse the trend so that we have a sustainable future, not for me, not for you, but for our children. Marami pong salamat.
Thank you very much, Joel. We will have a question and answer portion later on, please. So I encourage all the members to please post your question and answer your questions at the Q&A box. I think you can find that at the lower portion of your Zoom Zoom app. It's in the lower portion and the Q&A. Please type in your answers there, and then V. Cervantes will be the moderator when it comes to the question. Okay, now let's now go on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is actually younger than most of us. One of the most staunchest and most exciting and most innovative voices for the new discipline of planetary health, Dr. Lorenzo Guinto is Chief Planetary Doctor of PH Lab, a local think and do tank for advancing the health of both people and the planet. Dr. Guinto is an Obama Foundation Asia Pacific leader and an Aspen Institute New Voices Fellow. Lorenzo received his Doctor of Public Health degree from Harvard University, and for his doctoral dissertation, he investigated the concept of climate-smart health systems in coastal municipalities in the Philippines. Dr. Lorenzo is a member of the editorial advisory board of the Lancet Planetary Health, advisor to the Forum on Climate Change and Health of the World Innovation Summit for Health, and Next Generation One Health advisor for the Lancet One Health Commission, hosted by the University of Oslo. He previously consulted for various organizations, including the Institute of Tropical Medicine in Antwerp, Belgium, World Bank, World Health Organization, Health Care Without Harm, International Organization for Migration, Philippine Department of Health, and the UP Manila. Dr. Lorenzo has traveled to and lectured in nearly 50 countries, published more than 100 articles in scientific journals, books, and popular media, directed and produced short films that communicate the message of planetary healing to the world. In case you're interested, he has, you can go to YouTube and look at his videos there that he has produced. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to turn you over to Dr. Lorenzo Guinto.
Thank you very much for that very generous introduction, and thank you to FINEX for this wonderful opportunity. Let me just share my screen, okay? Can you see it now? Just want to make sure before I start.
Yes,
I guess you, okay, great. I guess you can see it now. So thank you again. And I'm really thrilled that despite the lockdowns, despite the inability to actually come together, we are having this conversation, a very important one. And thanks to digital technology for allowing us to have this. And so I guess my thesis is, how can we advance the health of both people and planet in a post-COVID world? And I'm really glad that Joel gave to us a great survey of all the environmental issues that we are currently confronting. And I hope to add more to the analysis, but also venture on some potential solutions that we can work on together. And you already mentioned that I'm back in the Philippines right after my doctoral studies at Harvard. It's great to be back, although it's hard to be back in the middle of the pandemic. And this is what I'm building, PH Lab. And It's glocal, meaning global and local, both in perspective and impact. It's a think and do tank because we want not just to do the thinking and the analysis, but also to really act on these challenges head on. And then finally, it's for not just for people alone, it's not just for the planet alone, it's for both people and planet. I think this integrated view and mindset is very critical in this day and age as we address COVID-19 and all the other health challenges that we face today. And usually I ask my students, what does PH mean? And I'll not ask you because I only have a very limited time, but it's not just planetary health, which you already heard, it's in the title of our program, but it's also public health, the health of people, and also the Philippines. That is the nickname of our country. And despite the opportunities abroad, as you know, I came from the States, I came back to the Philippines because of this. If the United States has a Silicon Valley, the epicenter of technological innovation, I strongly believe that the Philippines could be the Silicon Islands of planetary health. And I hope that you financial executives can help me realize this dream. Joel already started challenging your community. I'll add more challenges to the financing community here in the country. So I just want to show to you this very important reminder. We in public health know that human health, the population's health, is not generated inside the hospital by the doctor using a pill. As you can see, only 20% of our health comes from the medical care system. And where does the rest of health emanate from? You can see more than half of the pie comes from the social and environmental factors. And that is why when I was studying in med school, I early on realized that I cannot be your traditional doctor waiting in the clinic. Instead, some of us have to go out to tackle the social and environmental factors or determinants that shape human health. And as already insinuated by Joel a while ago, he talked about the great acceleration. These different phenomena, these human activities, anthropogenic changes are now getting back at us through a wide variety of health impacts. I'll not belabor you with this diagram, but as you can see on your left are consumption patterns, the demographic shifts, which means migration and urbanization, and technological change. We have invented every gadget that we can imagine, and more are yet to come. All these eventually lead to to a wide array of health challenges, as you can see on your right. And that's why in the 21st century, in the epoch of the Anthropocene, which I appreciate Joel already mentioned the term as well, our patients, and when I say our, it's not just us physicians, all of us, even financial executives, should see their patients, their clients, as not just the people alone, but also the planet. And that is why this field of planetary health was born. I mentioned a while ago, public health, that's only about the health of people. But planetary health, as you can see in the definition, it's both people and planet. And for the longest time, we've siloed the health sector and the environmental sector as if they are not deeply intertwined and interconnected. And the way I simplify it for a Filipino audience, and I honor Odette Alcantara, one of the founders of the Earth Day Network here in the Philippines, one of my mentors, she said that, our work is really about lahat. And I think planetary health is ang agham ng lahat. L for lupa, A for araw, H for hangin at hayop, A ako, T tubig at tao, lahat magkaugnay. And also planetary health as a concept is not a new thing. It's not an invention by, Harvard or some scholars. It is an old wine in new bottle. And we just need to go back to indigenous knowledge, to ancient wisdom, and we will discover that these people have already understood millennia ago the inextricable link between human health and the planet's health. And when you talk to these, to the descendants, of course, of these indigenous communities, they would say that the environment's health is a mere extension of our personal health. Unfortunately, the field of medicine has reduced health into symptoms and diseases that you can cure using a pill. And now I think we're going back full circle to have this integrated vision for the people and the planet's health. According to Chief Seattle, the earth does not belong to man, man belongs to earth. Man did not weave the web of life, he is merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself. And so, as I've said, when I was a medical student and I heard about climate change for the first time, I took it as the disease, you know, as you may, that I would be spending a lot of time focusing on studying. And as you can see there, I was in front of the UP College of Medicine, my alma mater. It says that climate change is the biggest global health threat of the 21st century, according to The Lancet, which is a medical journal. But fast forward, that same journal said that tackling climate change could be the biggest global health opportunity of the 21st century. And so this is an invitation, if we really want to improve the health of the world, the health of the Philippines, we need to tackle these major challenges such as climate change and environmental degradation. And here is how climate change and human health are interlinked. On your left, you will see, and this is the first message, there's so many pathways that link climate change to human health. They could be typhoons or storms or drought or heat waves or flooding. And all these pathways lead to a wide array of health impacts, the ones on your right. And as you can see there, there's no disease group that is immune to the impacts of climate change, whether they're heart disease due to air pollution or infectious diseases like dengue and malaria and leptospirosis, which you get from flooding, or mental illness due to natural disasters like typhoons, or the chronic stress that long-term climate change does bring. There's even a term that was coined eco-anxiety, and then injuries as well, et cetera, et cetera. And here, I'll not go into detail, but as you can see, the numbers of the impacts of climate change and planetary health problems on human health. At the top, 250,000 deaths annually from 2030 to 2050. And if we're scared of the numbers that we're seeing now in COVID, these are just conservative estimates on the health impacts of climate change. As you can see, $30 billion annually coming from the health costs due to climate change definitely will drain our financial systems. And this is also the major issue. Sir Joel mentioned the word equity. I want to elaborate on that. And the health consequences of climate change are first and foremost an issue of equity and justice. At the top, you will see the parts of the world that have emitted the greatest amount of greenhouse gases. That's North America, that's Europe, and that's China as a rising emitter. But at the bottom, you will see the parts of the world that are going to bear the brunt of climate change and its health impacts. That's Africa, that's Asia. And I always say the Pacific Islands are already too small to be enlarged. If not, they would have already disappeared by 2030 when climate change becomes really irreversible. So the Philippines, and I know you've already heard about my PHS, it's, I think, at the heart of planetary health. It's a hotspot for climate change, but I think we're also a place for innovation. And we know from our story, from our history, that when climate-related extreme weather events do occur, it's not just your food systems, it's not just your housing, your livelihood, your educational systems, even healthcare systems are disturbed, if not destroyed. I remember in Typhoon Haiyan in 2013, even health workers themselves became victims of the typhoon. And in the front page of the Inquirer the following day after Typhoon Haiyan, it said there, it's the worst disaster to hit PH. And we know that pertains to the Philippines, but also public health, and ultimately planetary health. So these are some of the issues related to climate change that afflict health. You know, dengue is now increasing in number, but also appearing in places where they used to not be endemic. For example, last year, there was already a case of dengue in Europe. So how can a tropical disease move to temperate parts of the world, temperate regions? And then this is something that we're not talking about that much. the ocean levels in the Philippines are rising at a faster rate than the global average, 5 times. And we know that when sea level does rise, seawater, which is high in salt, intrudes into our drinking water, into our freshwater systems. And that there's already a growing evidence in Bangladesh, at least, that when you consume high salt water, that leads to a wide array of health problems such as hypertension and preeclampsia, which is the hypertension in pregnant mothers. Okay? So the question is, are we ready to build health systems that consider the climate? I think actually, are we ready to build societies that consider the climate? And that has been the focus of my doctoral thesis. And I'll not belabor you with the 200 pages, but I actually turned my thesis into short films, as already mentioned a while ago, because I thought if a thesis can't be read by all, at least films can be accessed by anyone. And I'll share to you the links in a short while. So for me, the health systems of the future should be, universal. And I know in the Philippines, we have an unfinished universal healthcare agenda, which now COVID-19 is threatening to delay and disrupt. But also we need healthcare to be high value, that patients go to the healthcare facility and leave that facility with better health outcomes, but also happier. And we know that's not the situation, especially in a lot of our public hospitals and barangay health centers. But also health systems of the future should be climate smart. And climate smart means both adaptive to the effects of climate change, but also low carbon, mitigating the effects of climate change through reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Because we don't want healthcare to be accomplice to the crime. We don't want healthcare to be treating diseases that were generated by our own emissions. So that sounds inconsistent and antithetical. And then finally, we want health systems to be pandemic resistant. And now we're seeing that the Philippine health system, just like many health systems around the world, are far from being pandemic resistant. So now I'll just link climate change with coronavirus, with COVID. I will be remiss not to discuss this very quickly. And Joel already showed to you some slides regarding the origins of COVID that has tight linkages with environmental degradation. And as the planet continues to warm through climate change, we can anticipate more infectious diseases to emerge in the years to come. So probably, we might be able to overcome, and we will, this COVID-19 pandemic, but we can anticipate more epidemics in the years to come if we don't act now. And as you can see, from a market in Wuhan, that interaction between animals and humans has led to that zoonosis that Joel mentioned a while ago. Zoonosis is when, a virus jumps from animals to humans through wildlife consumption, through our encroachment of, natural ecosystems, through our consumption of meat even. And this is what happens because of globalization. A virus so microscopic and invisible can be spread around the world in just a matter of days and months. Okay? Also, the COVID-19 pandemic is a sneak preview of our preparedness or lack thereof for climate change. And what we know is that our health systems not ready for a pandemic, not ready for sure for climate change and its long-term health consequences. And this is the sad reality, when COVID-19 emerged at our doorstep, it didn't mean that climate change already stopped. In fact, these are the different climate hazards that we can anticipate in the next couple of months, from typhoons already happening in the country to locust crisis in Africa, heat waves in Europe, and then by the time January comes, bushfires will be back in Australia once more. So this is what's already happening in the Philippines. And people are now conflicted. Do I stay in the house to observe social distancing while my roof is being blown away by the wind and my house is being flooded, versus I move to the evacuation center and be exposed to the virus as you are being cramped in very close spaces? we should also start talking about the unintended consequence of our COVID-19 response. We might be creating new forms of pollution from plastic, disposables, through food packaging, but also we need to investigate the disposal of PPEs by our hospitals and healthcare systems. And of course, in the past few months, you might have seen news on the front page. It seems that the pandemic, the lockdowns have a silver lining. Air pollution has gone down, bluer skies and fresher air in China, where coal-fired power plants have been shut for some months. But this is the reality. While our CO2 emissions have gone down to 2020 levels for the past 3 months, as countries and cities and businesses reopen, emissions are surging back. So we're actually going back to the pre-pandemic climate trajectory that we already have before the lockdowns have started. So decarbonization through a pandemic, not a good option. And also, this is a chance to start thinking about the future of food systems. And, right now, we might have, been able to survive and provide some of our food needs. But the reality is our food stock is not going to sustain us for the next months, if not years. But also the food system that we have is defective at its very core. As you can see here, there's a global syndemic, multiple epidemics happening. 1 billion people on Earth are over-consuming, leading to obesity. Another billion people on Earth are undernourished, under-consuming. And that same food system is emitting carbon, using a lot of energy, water, soil, and other natural resources. And we know that the meat industry is the second largest emitter of greenhouse gases. We also know that meat consumption has already been declared by WHO as a carcinogen, meaning it causes cancer, especially red meat and processed meat. And we know that antimicrobial resistance, that's when antibiotics are not anymore effective because bacteria have become mutant and again resistant. The majority of antibiotic misuse is not happening in human medicine. 75% in the poultry and livestock industry. We've been pumping chickens, pigs, and cattle with antibiotics as if they're vitamins. And so there is a suggestion that we need to shift the global diet to a planetary health diet. And as you can see, this is a challenge for us Filipinos. Only a very small portion is composed of meat. And if you translate this into a week-long diet, that's only 1 serving in a week. And really, reduction of meat consumption is a quadruple win for people and planetary health. It reduces cancer, it reduces our emissions, it lowers the risk of antimicrobial resistance, and it prevents zoonosis, which I mentioned to you already a while ago. So I'm going to the last portion of my talk. I know it's long and there's so much information to share. And really there's, the new normal that we have to create should be a renovation of the political economy of planetary health. The old normal is abnormal and we cannot go back to that state. And we know that right now we have 9 planetary boundaries. And these boundaries, if you breach or violate them, will make the planet less conducive for human survival. 2 of them already breached. They're the ones in red, biosphere integrity. As already Joel said a while ago, the fastest rate of extinction of creatures great and small have occurred this past century. And you see there, biogeochemical flows have been greatly disrupted because of our addiction to artificial fertilizers, N for nitrogen, P for phosphorus. And what we need is an economy that protects the boundaries, but also addresses the social foundation. In this book, I hope that some of you have already read this book. I think this should be required reading for every financial executive. The donut economy is the economy that will bring us to a better, healthier, and more sustainable future. You will see there an economy that is in the middle of the donut, not exceeding the ecological ceiling, but also not having shortfalls in a social foundation, whether it's water, food, health, education, women empowerment, etc. And there is a study that showed, that investigated which of the countries in the world is closest to becoming like a donut. It's not the USA. As you can see, they've breached almost every planetary boundary that exists. It's not the Philippines. We might have not exceeded any of the planetary boundaries, but we are having a lot of shortfalls in the social foundation. And the answer is Vietnam. At least statistically, it has been shown to be the closest to the donut economy. And as we also speak today, Vietnam still has zero COVID mortality. There must be something happening in that country. And Amsterdam already embraced the donut model as a new model for their post-coronavirus economy. I hope that in the Philippines, we can bring it here. Of course, donut, we need to localize it. And I'm thinking it should be a pamayanang and negosyong sapin-sapin. So let's try to build this in the country. So my last messages to you is this: it's time for businesses to really think about the health of people and planet. And here are some of the recent articles. The one in the middle I wrote, there's an invitation that there should be a chief public health officer in the C-suite executive level in all corporations. And there's one study that while 75% of corporations that have an environmental strategy, only 9% of Fortune 500 corporations have a health strategy. We need to have more of that, especially in this age of COVID. And this is a framework that I actually want to experiment on here in the Philippines. I'm looking for collaborators from the business community. How can we build a culture of health in corporations? Not anymore just a CSR activity holding medical missions, but really putting health in the DNA of business in terms of employee health, in terms of consumer health, community health, and environmental health. So finally, this has been the most popular graph for the past 3 months, flatten the curve of COVID-19. And as we hear reports that the major hospitals in Metro Manila have already reached capacity, it just shows to us that we've not flattened the curve, but also we've not enhanced the healthcare system's capacity. That horizontal line there, that should have gone up, okay? But this is also another curve that we should bend and we should really flatten. And that is the curve of our carbon emissions and our ecological footprint. And unlike the healthcare's capacity, the Earth's capacity is non-negotiable and unchangeable. It's us that who needs to adjust. If not, and we're already afraid of first wave, second wave of COVID, we can anticipate a much bigger and much scarier wave that climate change and ecological destruction will bring to us if we don't act now. So together, let's advance the health of people and planet. Thank you very much for your patience. Looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Renzo, for that very passionate presentation. Now, let's go on to the next speaker. Yeah. Our next speaker is Assistant Secretary Romell Cuenca. Romell is the Deputy Executive Director of the Climate Change Commission and concurrently heads the Climate Investment Systems Service, which is the operational and technical unit in the CCC that primarily deals with climate finance and foreign assisted projects. Aside from heading the People's Survival Fund unit and climate finance related operation, he also speaks in the various national and international fora that the CCC is asked to participate in. Romell is a lawyer by profession. His previous roles in government made him well-versed in the fields of corporate law and compliance, public-private partnerships, and procurement. He has substantial experience in investor relations, information, policy work, national government liaison, corporate and local governance. Romell earned his Juris Doctor Law degree from that great school, Ateneo de Manila University, holds a Master of Development Management from the Asian Institute of Management. And I think Romell and I share the same hairstylist. Undersecretary Romell Cuenca.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. First off, I'd like to thank the board and the members of FINEX for allowing your Climate Change Commission to be part of this afternoon's conversation. We're happy to be here. We're always very open to speaking with anyone who cares to listen and talk about the climate and what we can do about it, the little we can do about it, of course. What I'm going to talk to you about today, I can pretty much just say what the previous two speakers said. That's basically it. I'm glad they took care of the science for me. It always helps when the scientists go ahead of me, because then I won't have to stumble through the science and the technical stuff. Because for whatever it's worth, I'm really just a bureaucrat from government. But I'm not here to be the government apologist. We're going to talk about what your government is trying to do, the initiatives, the policies we're trying to put out, just so we have the convergence of efforts between government, private sector, non-governmental organizations, academia, and the scientific sector. So let me just let me say that I appreciate the inputs of Sir Joel and Dr. Lorenzo. Again, it makes my job easier this afternoon. But let's go back to basics. No? Let's just look at, okay, it's climate change. We're going to be talking about climate change, planetary health. We, as an agency, of course, will be the very first advocate to say that climate change is happening now. And vulnerable countries like the Philippines are bearing the brunt of its impacts. Like illustrated earlier by Dr. Lorenzo, temperature and sea level rise is on the uptick. And therefore, we're always be on the front lines. We in the climate change, your Climate Change Commission is in the front line in asking for a stronger call for climate action. Can we go to the next slide, please? As defined by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and that's a mouthful, the UNFCCC, climate change is the change in climate which may be attributed directly or indirectly to human activity, altering the composition of the global atmosphere and the natural climate variability. Specified in the reports of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the increase in global temperature shall produce overlapping risks and even exacerbate current hazards and vulnerabilities. So in the slide, you can see we've always been advocates of reducing the heat emissions. Most countries are saying, no, you know what, we'll be okay with, even if there's going to be a 2-degree rise in global temperatures. But the Philippines have been the foremost advocate globally to make sure that we keep it nearer to 1.5 and farther from 2 degrees. To pave the way to climate resiliency, the Paris Agreement entered into force in 2015, and during the Community Convention of Parties, it's COP21, to strengthen the global response to keep global temperature rise below 2 degrees Celsius, and to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase even further to 1.5 Celsius. It encourages investments and assistance to steer technology transfer, capacity development, and climate finance to developing countries, particularly vulnerable countries such as the Philippines, to address the impacts of climate change. Next slide, please. Even before the Philippine ratification of the Paris Agreement in 2017, Republic Act 9729, or the Climate Change Act of 2009, established the Climate Change Commission as the lead policymaking body mandated to coordinate, monitor, and evaluate programs and action plans of the government relating to climate change. Well, what the Climate Change Act really wanted us to do was for us to come up with a national framework strategy on climate change and a national climate change action plan. And these were indeed developed. The National Framework Strategy, as well as the National Climate Change Action Plan, have to be reviewed and updated every 3 years. And as part of that updating, indicative work streams have been identified to ensure that the synergies between adaptation and mitigation are captured in the updating of these frameworks. The ultimate goal of the NCCAP, or the National Climate Change Action Plan, is to provide a timely and relevant operational plan in building adaptive capacities to increase the resilience of various sectors and natural ecosystems to climate change. Next slide, please. As you can see here in the slide, the NCCAP outlines the country's agenda for adaptation and mitigation from 2011 going through to 2028, based on technical analysis and consultation with various stakeholders. The key actions, we can't do everything all at once, so we needed to focus on 7 thematic areas, and these are food security, water sufficiency, ecological and environmental stability, human security, climate smart industries and services, sustainable energy, and knowledge and capacity development. These thematic areas aim to enhance adaptive capacities of communities and natural ecosystems and provide a just transition towards climate smart development. Next slide, please. So what did the CCC need to do for all of these to be operationalized? What we did in the CCC, and of course our idea was to not just stay here in Metro Manila and sermon and lecture from ivory towers. We needed to bring it down to the ground. So we launched our flagship capacity building program. This is what we call our Communities for Resilience, or CORE program. The CORE program aims to help local government units and other stakeholders, including non-governmental organizations, members of the academe, and even the private sector, to increase their knowledge on climate change, adaptation, and mitigation, and in support and creation of and enhancement of LGU's local climate change action plans. So from the NCCAP, which is your National Climate Change Action Plan, we're now trying to shepherd local government units, your municipalities, your cities, your provinces, so that they can come up with their own local climate change action plans. As of today, the CCC has gone to the ground and trained 265 LGUs and 125 higher educational institutions on how to formulate LCCAPs and how to mainstream climate change in their local plans, programs, and budgets. 265 LGUs, that's not really too many. There's more than 1,000. So we've got a whole lot more to go. But when we started out, only about 17 or so LGUs had local climate change action plans. And why the HEIs, or why the higher educational institutions? Our strategy was that who would have the technical capacities to help LGUs who usually don't have the technical people, personnel, to come up with local climate change action plans. That would rest in the academic institutions near where their municipalities are. So we thought of bringing in the academe as well to shepherd these LGUs to come up with science-based, evidence-based local climate change action plan. Next slide, please. All right, so how do we pay for all of this? Well, the government provides the annual budget of the national government agencies, GOCCs, or government-owned and controlled corporations, state universities and colleges, and local government units through the enactment of the budget. And since the passage of the law, national and subnational government agencies are encouraged to have budget allocations for climate change-related programs, projects, and activities. These climate change-related expenditures are being tagged, monitored, and reflected through the Climate Change Expenditure Tagging Program. Next slide, please. The CCET, or the Climate Change Expenditure Tagging, is being spearheaded by the CCC in coordination with DBM and DILG. Aside from the national budget, the government also has a special fund for change adaptation projects. And this happened when RA, or Republic Act 10174, was enacted in 2012, which established the People's Survival Fund. The PSF, for the People's Survival Fund, provides a long-stream finance mechanism for climate change adaptation projects for local government units and local community organizations. It has an annual allocation of at least 1 billion pesos, but this is supplementary to any annual appropriation and may be augmented through donations, endowments, grants, or contributions. The fund, PSF, is being managed by the PSF board, composed of the Department of Finance as the chair, CCC, DBM, DILG, the Philippine Commission on Women, NEDA, and sectoral representatives from the academe, business, and civil society. So far, we've had 6 projects approved in Surigao del Norte, Surigao del Sur, Agusan del Norte, Camotes Island in Cebu, Tarlac, and the province of Sarangani. That's for domestic climate finance. For international climate finance mechanisms, and with focusing more on adaptation action with mitigation co-benefits, the international arena is steering finance to ensure attainment of countries' mitigation strategies. As we finalize our nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, we have identified 6 sectors which need additional support. And these are agriculture, waste, industries, transport, forestry, and energy. To supplement domestic sources to climate finance, mechanisms are enabled and can be accessed by member states. First is the Global Environment Facility, or GEF, which is targeted towards addressing climate change, mitigation, biodiversity, land degradation, chemicals and waste, and international waters. For the Philippines, the GEF operational focal point is the DNR, with the CCC acting as the multilateral environment agreement focal point for the UNFCCC. Another climate finance stream we've been able to access is the Green Climate Fund. The GCF targets investments in low emission and climate resilient development, and as of this date, the GCF has committed financing for 129 projects with a total of $5.6 billion US, equivalent to 1.6 tons of greenhouse gas emission reduction. The CCC serves as the national designated authority of the Philippines to the GCF and leads the development of the country program for the period 2018 to 2022. And the evaluation and endorsement of project proposals received from the country are also done by the CCC. In November of last year, the GCF board approved its first project for the Philippines, and that was the establishment of a multi-hazard impact-based forecasting and early warning system project with funding amounting to $10 million US. Next slide, please. So that we can realize, or we can make it a whole of country approach towards climate resilience, we recognize the role of the private sector in climate action. In this regard, the CCC seeks to establish the Climate Investment Network. We envision this to be composed of banks, financial institutions, and key players in the private business sector to catalyze, increase, and organize investments coming from the private sector. The establishment of the CIN is envisioned to increase the total climate investments of the Philippines, summing up the tagged expenditure of the national government agencies and investment reports for both local, legislative and executive, and international reporting. Next slide, please. The application of a whole of government and multi-sectoral approaches to developing long-term strategies is deemed necessary. And we see that all sectors, government, private, business, civic society organizations, and the academe are enjoined and encouraged to participate in the development and implementation of plans, policies, and programs concerning climate change. In terms of the government approach, the government has set up what we call the Cabinet Cluster on Climate Change Adaptation, Mitigation, and Disaster Risk Reduction. This was created to systemize policy and strategy development to address the impacts of climate change. The cluster is also mandated to take the lead in the effective integration of policies and programs on climate risk management. To add science to the whole lot, and also to be compliant with law, the National Panel of Technical Experts is also constituted to provide technical advice to the Commission on climate science, technologies, best practices, climate finance, economics, climatology, so that we can achieve climate resilience. Next slide, please. The path to resiliency includes behavioral change, which can be triggered by one's understanding of climate change, to spread awareness and information, as well as to build an ecosystem where climate change-related data are available and accessible. The CCC has developed several information systems. First is what we call the NICDs, or the National Integrated Climate Change Database Information and Exchange System. It serves as the integrated climate change information portal of the CCC for consolidating and monitoring data and information on climate change and climate actions from various public and private sources. For the decision makers, this system provides them data and information which they can refer to in making well-informed decisions and action plans. The CCC is also developing the National Climate Risk Management Framework. We started with this in 2018, and now we're putting in now the additional lens of the new normal, given the pandemic we're being beset. The NCRMF, whose objective is to harmonize and integrate various efforts in climate risk management, ensures that the climate action planning system will be based on a unified and integrated science and risk-based approach. We also try to make sure that this information is accessible to all stakeholders. Next slide, please. And I'm just about going to be wrapping up. Of course, in the information age, we acknowledge and recognize that a well-informed public is a prepared public, and therefore, through our official website, social media pages, we utilize and provide information so that this may become readily available to the public, as well as the Commission's programs, knowledge resources. We share, including our modules and our researches. These are all posted in our social media platforms, including our website. Next slide, please. Just to close, we'd like to say that the CCC intends to contribute to the discourse on how to navigate our country towards a more resilient and sustainable, better normal. We are inclined to sustain the momentum, to achieve heightened growth through available solutions and the development of opportunities in pursuit of climate change action. Effective dialogue and coordination between the local and national authorities, private sector, and all stakeholders is critical in implementing effective measures. With this, we are truly grateful for this opportunity for allowing us to share what the government has been doing to address climate change, even in the time of this pandemic. We look forward to working with you, all of you, towards a more resilient and sustainable, better normal. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much, ASec Cuenca, for the very good presentation. Let me turn you over to V. Cervantes, one of the committee members of the Environment Committee. She will be asking the questions posted in the chat and the Q&A box today. V, can you please take over and your panel?
Yeah, thank you, Tony. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Again, I am V. Cervantes. I am Deputy General Manager at Nabinsuo Bank Limited. I am pleased to be the moderator for this Q&A session. Well, we tackle this very timely and truly relevant topic in this time of the pandemic. Before I proceed to the Q&A, let me thank all our speakers for selflessly sharing their time and expertise on the subject matter. They have clearly validated the connection between COVID-19, the problem we are having now, and the humanity's neglect and overconsumption of the planet. They have also starkly highlighted how the situation has worsened for our planet in many levels, and how urgently we need to show love to our nature and our planet. Thankfully, they have also put forward some ideas and guidance for us to think about how we can help reverse the situation for our planet Earth. Now, we hope to further the discussion, so I encourage all to please send in your questions to the Q&A chat box. But while you do that, let me throw this first question to all our speakers for warm up. Okay, so for the first question, this talks about, how the environment has already been a major challenge and an agenda in international relations since the 1990s, 3 decades ago. That's why we have global treatises, global treaties, bilateral agreements, and comprehensive frameworks to achieve environmentally sustainable future. But then when COVID-19 happened, most governments and countries are still unprepared and maybe even ill-equipped to handle the pandemic. So from your perspective, what has been missing in the programs, policies, and narratives and actions of countries and governments for environmental protection all this time? And if you can also comment on what has been, how our own environmental policies have been deficient in that respect. So maybe I'd like, maybe we can start with Joel for your quick reaction, please.
Okay.
Joel?
Oh, okay, I just got unmuted. Okay, you hear me?
Yes, we can.
It's not just 30 years when the environmental movement actually started. I remember this April 22, we celebrated the 50th year of Earth Day. And it was coming from the United Nations, declaring something that we have to do something about the environment. What's the thing missing? I guess we're talking to the right person or group of people. I think what's really missing is the participation of the finance and the economic group. As I have mentioned in the presentation, what's driving degradation is the economy. So we have to work with the private sector more so that we can hand in hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Renzo, maybe have your thoughts on this, please.
Thank you very much. My answer to that question is, I think we're not lacking of policies and at all levels, domestic to global. We have treaties that address some of the very critical environmental issues and health problems as well. We have lots of laws in the country. I remember, and ASec can also reiterate this, reinforce this. One time the UN lauded the Philippine climate laws as some of the best in the world, if not the best. And so the policy frameworks are there. And I think the major challenge is implementation and execution. But also I think, and echoing what Joel was talking about a while ago in terms of the role of the financial community, we're not talking that much yet about the economy. That really, I think, is at the heart of both the planetary crisis and the health crisis. And a while ago, I talked about renovating the political economy right now, and we're all educated in this kind of mindset, this framework. But the economy can be grown in a limitless manner, and oftentimes at the demise or at the expense of the planet. I think that framework has to be changed, and that's why I'm an advocate of the donut economy and other economic models that take into account the environment and not look at it anymore as a mere externality, as we love referring to it in economics. So that's my initial thoughts. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Romell, ASec, please.
Oh, in terms of what's missing, I agree with the previous speakers, Dr. Lorenzo and Mr. Joel, in terms of the completeness of policy. Now, so where do we come in as government? Enforcement, yes, a lot needs to be done in that part. In fact, some of government agencies, even the CCC, struggles with internally with complying with environmental laws. And I don't want to be an apologist for the shortcomings of government, but it doesn't happen overnight. You can have the best laws there is, but if the governance structure is not present and the cooperation of all other stakeholders is not there, it's going to be tough for even the best of governments to undertake and to enforce. We see this as a partnership, and we don't think it's a good idea to just say, what's government doing? That's why we look at it as a convergence approach. And it's not just whole of government, but it should be whole of society, whole of nation in an approach. Therefore, it's not just what is government doing about it, but also each of us should learn to think about and actually do something about, okay, what am I doing about it?
Mhm. Right. Thank you. So I guess the 3 points, just to summarize, is maybe the funding side, no, the participation of finance and economic groups, and the improvement in execution and implementation, and also well, limiting the use of the planet through the concept of like the donut economy, and also partnership between the government and the private sector. Thank you for that. Okay, moving on to the next question. This is for ASec Romell. Well, although the CCC is focusing on climate change, well, as we live in the new normal or in the post-COVID world, there may be new problems, environmental problems that will be created by the new practices and behavior. For example, the widespread use of takeout food containers, the disposal of masks and PPEs and plastic. So is CCC in a position to help with the regulations not to address these new problems that it may arise? And well, I saw that you have a core program where you engage also the local government units to support the implementation of the regulations to the community level. But how are we ensuring that the action of one local government unit does not does not have a negative impact on the adjacent units in the area?
We're trying to do away with the NIMBY mindset. No, not in my backyard. We always try to look at it in terms of an integrated approach when we go down to the community level. For instance, we can't just talk to one municipality in a series of municipalities in a coastal area. And not only that, you have to go uphill. In other words, we have to conceptualize a ridge to reef approach, meaning those in the hills should know that whatever they do there will affect what's happening in the delta, in the river delta as they go along downstream. So it should be an integrated approach. You can't have municipalities or LGUs working in silos. Each municipality or each LGU should be mindful of what the effects of their own actions will be with their neighbors. No? And that goes as well into when you put in the pandemic COVID-19 lens. Sure, you're protected, you've got a complete set of PPEs. What about the next guy? What about your neighbor? What about the depressed community next to your gated villages? How are you helping out? And then with your PPEs, when you're done with them for the day, what do you do with them? Do you just chuck them in the trash? So every single action we do, and we have to know that, is connected and will have an effect next door. Therefore, an integrated approach is essential, making sure that one's actions will not just make an effect or have a good effect in a silo, because everything is connected.
For our next question, maybe we can address this to Joel. Okay. There's an article that came out in Deutsche Welle last June 2020, and a German philosopher was quoted there as saying, human beings are not prepared to protect nature in any sense, because in all our history as a species, our deepest conviction always was that we are the ones who have to be protected by the powers of nature. So the question is, can we ever be prepared to protect nature? And how do we handle those that deny the science of climate change?
You know, I think we have no choice. We have to protect nature. It's been said by Renzo and ASec Romell, no? And you know, we really have no option because we're already running in a deficit, no? And I always like to say that, you know, my favorite economist is this guy named Schumacher, and he said small is beautiful. And given the pandemic, we actually have just realized, some people are saying because of the pandemic, it gave us, you know, the silver lining, you know, from the MOA area, you can see the wind farms in Pililla. We can see very nice blue skies. You know. Come to think of it, this is the way we should be consuming things. This is our one planet equation and not a 1.7 equation. And we just have to live with what we have. We should not be overspending with what we have, whether at the global level, at the country level, and even at the household level. So with this situation, I know that people are very adaptive. You know, sabi nga ni Charles Darwin, and I want to quote him. You know, the people that will be that will rule this world are not the strongest. You can see the U.S. is the strongest economy, strongest country in the world, but they're now top in terms of COVID. Nor is the brightest, but it's the most adaptive that will survive. So no choice but to adapt. Sorry to be very simplistic, but we have to go down to basics.
Thank you. Okay, and then this one, maybe Renzo can take up. While our speakers have, well, you have a lot of information that can be translated to action points. How can this be shared to a wider audience? Can these ideas be included in school curriculum? For example, introducing a course or subject on good manners and right conduct towards the environment in our schools. Any thoughts on how we can have this in place?
Thank you. And you know, I think there's bits and pieces already of that in primary education, both environment and health. And I think we need to intensify more. And I think COVID-19, the combination of COVID-19 and climate should be a very strong argument on why we need to intensify health and environment education, starting from primary school. You know, we don't need to wait for high school or college to introduce them to these concepts. And we can already tailor these content in an age-appropriate way. But beyond education in school, I think we need to make sure that there's heightened health and environmental awareness everywhere, right? And even if we keep on educating our young people, this is how you should manage your waste, this is how you should you know, consume your food, and then they leave the school and go back to the place where they come from, where there's pollution, there are no systems put in place for proper waste disposal, the food that they can easily access and also affordable are the unhealthy options, then we're again being very symptomatic in our approach. So, you know, education coupled with systematic kind of answers and solutions should go hand in hand.
Sounds like a big task also, right?
Indeed.
Okay, for this one, okay, for Joel, if we are reaching a point of no return, why is the agenda on preserving planetary health seems to have received still mixed views and not a top priority? And still not a top priority.
I think it's the other way around, you know. That's why it's good we have the Climate Change Commission and the Renzo's group really pushing that we're all integrated. No? So I'm sorry to say, and I have to repeat, we have no choice. Not for me, not for you, probably for Renzo and the younger generations. Tony Boy, that's for us. But it's really for the future. We've seen events before that were once every 100 years, now every 10 years. You know, the forest fires that were like that frequency are now every year and will become more normal. So with the COVID, we just saw how environment can really affect people. So much direct rather than, you know, I don't have water for 3 hours a day during a summer, but this is more life-threatening. So this is more than a wake-up call, and I think we should be able to really, you know, be as one and manage our way of doing things. No? I'd just like to add, Dr. Renzo is always going back to that donut economy, which I like. You know, there's one study that has shown that the most sustainable country is, guess what? It's not Vietnam. Guess what? Not the US, obviously. There was one study that the most sustainable country right now is Cuba. Why? They only live within their means. For 50 years, they were basically on a lockdown. They have to live with what they produce. And Dr. Renzo, I don't know. There was also an article at CNN by Sanjay Gupta that probably not valid by a scientific study, but it's considered one of the best health systems in the world because, you know, wala pang sakit yung mga tao doon. Their doctors are going house to house doing preventive medicine. And so it doesn't have to be big. It's not the big buildings that will count. It's not the highways, the roads that will count. It's actually the way you manage and you use your resources so that you can live within your means.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, we're down to our last question. So we're running out of time. So this one is for from Christina San Juan. There are a lot of opportunities now to recycle plastics, but a lot of our plastics aren't marked with the recycling code. How can we start to change that? Maybe we can ask Romell to take that up. So, hello? Please unmute ASec Romell, please.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, I think our laws are not deficient in terms of what needs to be done in terms of the plastics, no? Consumption, especially now in this times of the pandemic. A lot of people are having takeaway food delivered to their houses and all that. So they come in plastic containers or single-use plastics. There can still be something can still be done about that. What I do is try to engage with those who I regularly get my food from, at least the few times that I am allowed by my wife to order in. And I try to say, look, I order from you anyway. Can we reuse the plastic tubs which came from you anyway? Can we just wash it? We'll give it to you back to you, and can we use that again when you deliver the next batch of food to us? It really goes down to, and I saw a comment earlier in the chat box which says it's not just a government thing, it's not just a sectoral thing, it should be a personal thing to everyone. No, you being financial executives, of course, the first P is important to you, and that's profit. Dr. Renzo and Sir Joel have talked about the other P's, people and planet. I'd like to introduce the fourth P. It's not my original idea. I read it somewhere. Sorry, I forget where. But the fourth P should be purpose. And there should be a sense of purpose to all of this. Purpose, as a synonym, the closest thing I can think of is your personal advocacy. What else are you doing as an individual, as a family household, and do that for a series of households within your community, in your family circle, in your barangay, then go up to your purok, or purok first, then barangay, then municipality, then province, then region, nationally. It can't be all top down, meaning national government or government itself or big government itself telling you what you need to do. There's a lot of information out there, a lot of simple ways of making things work, which you can work on and act on. It shouldn't stop us just because nobody's watching. It's really a matter of segregating your own waste, recycling what you can, and doing what you can on the personal level for the planet.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I guess from government, it's more of if we can create a regulation to enforce businesses to put on their labels, and also, as you mentioned, the business sector also has the responsibility to do that, no, for their products. And I guess the earlier answer by Renzo in terms of education is something that can help create the discipline of people to recycle as appropriate. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Unfortunately we have run out of time, but there are a lot of there are questions in the Q&A box. I hope you can find time later to respond to our audience. Thank you so much for this wonderful Q&A. Have a good afternoon. Back to you, Tony.
Thank you very much, V. Right now, before we get to the next part of the program, I'd like to call on President Jeng to formally induct Ms. Singapan. She lost internet connection earlier. President Jeng, you have to unmute yourself, President Jeng.
Yes. Hi, Tony Boy. Yes. Let's do that. Is Trishan on the line now?
Yes, she's right here.
Yes, now I am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trishan. So may I request you to raise your right hand and repeat after me? I state your name.
Trishan Singapan,
Having been accepted as a member of the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines,
having been accepted as a member of the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines,
do hereby solemnly swear
do hereby solemnly swear
that I will faithfully discharge,
that I will faithfully discharge,
to the best of my ability, my duties and responsibilities
to the best of my ability, my duties and responsibilities
in the pursuit of its good goals and objectives,
in the pursuit of its goals and objectives,
that I will protect and uphold
that I will protect and uphold
its constitution and bylaws,
its constitution and bylaws,
that I will abide by its code of ethics,
that I will abide by its code of ethics,
that I will observe the highest
that I will observe the highest
professional, moral, and ethical standards,
professional, moral, and ethical standards,
and that I voluntarily impose this obligation upon myself
and that I voluntarily impose this obligation upon myself
without mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
without mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Trishan. Welcome to FINEX.
Thank you, President Jeng, and thank you, FINEX.
Welcome, Trishan, to FINEX. Now,
Thank you, sir.
can I call on Ms. Flor Tariela to do the closing remarks for this general membership meeting?
Yeah. Thank you, Tony Boy. Wow, this is FINEX session. It's really very informative. And while I wanted to say it's a wake-up call, somebody said it's really more than a wake-up call. I'd like to thank the Environment Committee led by our able chairman, Marivic Sugapong, our Vice Chair, Chito Oreta, and Omi Yaptinchay, who organized today's session. It's very timely and relevant, the topic of responding to the urgent call for planetary health. I'd like to thank our guest speakers, who are all very distinguished. WWF Executive Director, Joel Palma, who told us in no uncertain terms that 2020 is the year of the turning point for the planet and that we only have a decade. Wow, just 10 years more up to 2030. And we really need to act fast, and we have to act now because we are producing less than what we are consuming. We also like to thank Dr. Renzo Guido. He showed us that there is a close correlation between the planet's health and our own very own health. And that's why we have this coronavirus, and I hope there will be no more additional coronavirus once we are able to solve this. We also thank Attorney Romell Cueva, the Deputy Director of Climate Change Commission, who walked us through the government initiatives on climate emergencies and pandemic resilience. But we all know government can only do so much. So we in the private sector should do our part. Are we living our lives protecting the planet's health, or are we contributing to making it sicker? This is the question that we all ask ourselves. We should ask ourselves every day. I also like to thank our very able host, Tony Boy Ongshako, and our moderator, Vilma Cervantes, our FINEX staff led by Mike, Binluan, and Judith Torres, and thank you to all of you who attended this afternoon session. Dr. Renzo reminded us about the ancient wisdom. We belong to Earth. What we do to Earth, we do to ourselves. So I do hope and pray that we will take care of planet Earth and our environment. So starting today, before it is too late. So to everyone, stay safe, thank you, and God bless.
Thank you very much, Flor Tariela. She's the liaison director for the Environment Committee. President Jeng, please adjourn the meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Tony Boy. And thank you once again to our distinguished speakers and our FINEX members who participated and organized this GMM. At this point, thank you very much, everyone who attended, and the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you very much, President Jeng. Can I ask the panelists to answer the questions in the Q&A section or in the chat if you have time? Thank you very much.
Ano yun, primary,